This is a daughter podcast where dads come to talk, think, and thrive with your hosts, Oscar and Blandon. Our mission is to cultivate a community of strong, mindful, and present fathers.
We want to curate honest conversations with all men, but especially those who have the honor of raising daughters.
Hey everyone, Oscar here at the Daughter Podcast with Blandon on the other side. And today we've got the man, Trevor. Trevor is the person who essentially got everything in motion for us to start this podcast. And here we are now working through the podcast, learning a lot, right, Blandon? Learning a lot. And
we are learning a lot right now. Yeah, for sure.
And finally, our first guest, which should be no one else but Mr. Trevor. How you doing, Trevor?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm just so appreciative. Happy to be here talking to you guys right now. I appreciate you guys for starting this whole thing up. I've really enjoyed the first few episodes and looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, man, we're looking forward to you giving us some of your daughtered wisdom, because Blandon and I were literally trying to learn and make up, for me, 3 playbooks. We talked about this, right? Or not playbooks, what do we say, manuals? 3 manuals.
Yeah, manuals.
That I thought I had it going on the first one, and then each manual is different for the other vehicles that we have, which are our daughters. So I'm glad to have you here, man. How you doing, Blandon?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm super excited to have Trevor on. You are literally the reason why we're doing this today. So please don't be humble about it. Like, take your flowers right now, bro. Like, we appreciate that someone wanted this space and that we needed that, that kind of like catalyst, that swift kick in the butt to say, why aren't we doing this? We've been talking about this, and now someone is like asking for it, looking for it. And although I do feel a little left out because I haven't been invited to this Fuel Hunt page. I mean, or
listen, there's,
I mean, I might feel a way about it, but it is what it is.
Listen, there's standards, sir. I have to teach you the standards first. We'll have to talk to Joey over at Fuel Hunt and see if we can make some room for you.
Okay. All right.
We'll get you in, though. We'll get you in.
Okay, we'll see.
Sure.
Well, I mean, as long as, is there like a hazing process involved? Like, do I have to wear boxers on my head and all that shaving cream on my?
You got to work hard. I'll tell you that. If you're not willing to put in work, that it's not the place.
Oh no, I'll put in work. Yeah.
Yeah, but Blandon's got the work thing down for sure.
Well, there we go.
We'll get him. We'll get him going.
You sound like a good fit.
Yeah, okay. That's right. But the other thing that our folks don't know is that we've been trying to get this going for a couple of weeks now. I've been talking to Trevor. He's got a full-time job. I've got a full-time job. Blandon's got a full-time job. So we're trying to find this space. I've been traveling, currently still not at home traveling. As you can see, my background is not my daughter's room as normal. Blandon, you were traveling, and then you're going to travel here soon again. So we're trying to get these things going. Trevor, I know you got, your everyday job, and then you got your daughters, which we'll talk about today. So, man, I can't be more thankful to finally get on and get this conversation going and have you on here. So without further ado, we'll get started, man. Tell us about yourself, Trevor.
I have 2 daughters. I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I am a physical education teacher and coach for the last 20 years. Okay. And, my real focus is on being the best dad and the best husband that I can be. And that's why I put that comment out there, because I'm always looking for other perspectives and other ways to better myself, to be the best father to my kids that I can be. And so I think this is a good avenue.
Yeah, man. And it was the perfect timing. We mentioned, we've been talking about doing this for a while. We, just like you, are constantly working to be better fathers, better husbands, and really, that better leader, because we got to lead in our home. And so, man, we were all talking until you put that out there, and we're like, all right, it's go time. So glad to have you, man. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're over on the East Coast, right?
I am. I'm in New York, about a half hour outside of the city.
New York, okay. And tell me, man, when did you first get daughter?
So I was first daughtered in 2019. I started 2014. Second time was 2019. Um,
Okay. All right.
so yeah, we found out that we were having a baby and officially on New Year's Eve, a few hours before we were hosting a New Year's Eve party. So that was pretty wild.
Oh wow.
And then
What a way to bring
we
in the new
fully,
year, man.
what's that?
I say, what a way to bring in the new year.
For sure.
New
For
baby.
sure.
Yeah. So we both, my wife and I both fully expected to have a boy. I'm one of three boys in my family, and then going out extended family, I have on one side of my family there's 13 boys and one girl, and on the other side there were 9 boys and 2 girls. So, I
Wow.
just figured, this is what we do. We make boys. And so when we found out we were having a girl, it was an absolute shock to both of us.
Wow. So you and I were talking a little bit before we hit record, and you were mentioning your first thoughts. So let me ask you first your first thought about becoming a father. So you don't know you having a daughter yet. You're having a child.
Right.
Were you guys preparing to have a child? Did you kind of plan that out, or was that
No, it
what was
was
your first thought?
so it was a surprise to us, but I was super stoked. I was so excited, like counting down the days till she was going to be here. Till at that point in time, I thought it was he. Um, but counting down the days, and then the day that we found out that it was a girl, the first thing that popped into my head was not a baby girl. First thing that popped into my head was having to raise a teenage girl and having to make it through those teenage years. And that's been something that I've always been concerned about. And so that's part of my drive is to build that foundation, to have a good relationship with her, because I know that there's going to be rocky times to make it through. And having that foundation and that relationship, I think is probably the best way to get through that.
Yeah, absolutely. The thought process of us going through that. Brandon explained his, I explained mine, but um, it's so weird how we go, for lack of better terms, we go to the negative right away, right? Like I mean, I know I did. Like you and I, Brandon, we talked. Like my first thought
Right.
is like, wait a minute, girl, like guns, security system, and what do I do when she's a teenager? Like it's like legitimately a
Yeah.
thought that goes through the mind. Um, so I'm right there with you. I don't know if Brandon, did you have anything? Did you have a thought up front like that of teenage girl?
No, I didn't know, and everybody said that, and I think that was like everybody was trying to intrude in on that, and I couldn't get past the baby phase though. I couldn't, and I'm still there because I'm like we talked about. You look up and they're like 7 or 9 or 12, and it's like, where did the time go? So immediately, I didn't go to like what they're gonna be like as a teenager, what they're gonna be like as an adult. I was just, I guess, captivated by that moment in time. So yeah, I just kind of remained present. I think that will probably kick in later and take me by surprise, and then I'll
Yeah,
be
yeah,
a
yeah.
mess running to you guys for assistance and help. But yeah, I guess I should have looked toward that, but I didn't. No, no, man, I didn't.
Well, and you mentioned it, and maybe Trevor, you can relate to this. Is it almost takes us out of the moment because you're starting to future thought. Like you're like, all right, what do I have to do to get to future thought, right? And I know for me, maybe I'll just speak for myself, but I find that I'll get out of the moment because I'm thinking, and not positively. Like it's just like I'm thinking future. Like, how am I going to deal with this
Yeah.
in the future when it's not even here yet? So maybe that's where that comes from is that future thought process as you go
And I,
through.
but I think we have to think in the future. And I think that like mine was more like preparation for the future. Like, what am I gonna set up? What systems? What legacy am I gonna leave behind? But it didn't catapult them in age for me though, right? It was like because I'm still looking at them as babies, and it's like, man, I need to protect these babies, but still in the future. But it didn't say, oh my gosh, what are they gonna be like at 13, 14, 15, 16, and I just didn't have that, but I can see where some guys would just automatically jump to that if you weren't prepared to have a daughter up front, right?
Mhm.
You were saying, Trevor, that in your mind, you come from a family of boys. So you thought you were going to be a boy maker. Did that have any, sometimes that hits his ego a little bit. Did that hit your ego some when you had to come to grips with having girls?
I don't know. I don't know if I would say that, but I do feel like that I felt like my purpose was to raise men. And, I still feel like that is a part of my purpose. Now that takes a backseat to being a father to my daughters, but that's an important part of being a father to my daughters as well. So as a coach, as a teacher, I want to try to raise good young men because I want there to be
Right.
good young men out there for my daughters. Initially
For sure.
it was just that, that's what I felt like was my purpose. And I still feel like that's a part of it. But now obviously once my girls came around, they're my world. So that's my purpose.
Right. Yeah.
Trevor, what was the conversation like between you and your wife when you both found out you're having a girl? Was this what was the conversation like?
I don't know. We were both, like I said, we were both pretty shocked. And then I think she was kind of worried about me, but I came around pretty quick, like it's like that initial, moment of shock. And then it's like, hey, listen, we're ready. All I care is that, I have a healthy baby and that I can be the best and raise him up to be the best person possible,
Yeah. So were you guys in an ultrasound when that happened, right? Like that's when they do
Yeah.
is that where no one find out?
Yeah.
I asked because I wasn't, right? So we talked about this before. My first child, I was
Right.
not able to make the ultrasound and it was a phone call, which was a disaster. We've already discussed that in other episodes. We won't discuss that again. Uh, my wife still doesn't let me forget it because she re-listened to that episode, and I'm like, yes, I know, I get it. I suck, whatever. So the conversation, that's the conversation, it, getting into your guys' minds. But what happens at that very moment? Because you're still at the ultrasound place. They're looking through there. What is that thought process of like, oh, it's a girl?
I think we were just silent. I think when she first told us, just in shock, we were just silent and just kind of contemplating. And then I just said, all right, we're having a girl. So let's move forward and let's get ready for this thing.
Nice. And this is 2014, right?
2014. Yeah.
So again, math is not my forte here, but we'll go with it. We're looking at almost 10. You said she was 9.
Yep.
Right.
Open up on
And
10.
then, and did I hear 21 is when you got redaughtered?
No, 19 was the next one.
Okay. So tell us about that. Were you now waiting for another daughter, or were you thinking, all right, now my boy's coming?
Well, we were, we were hopeful for a boy, but, sort of deep down, kind of like, well, it might be a girl, and so it wasn't the same kind of shock. It was just like, all right, would love to have a boy, but, if we have another girl, that's great too. And that's what it turned out to be. And like I said, it wasn't the same kind of reaction. It was like, all right, cool. Here we are. We know a little bit about this now, right? We got a girl.
Yeah.
Got a little practice with that, so we can kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Keith
In the
Manuel.
game at being a girl dad at that point. So
Yeah. Double up.
Well, again, that's why I bring back that manual, right? I was like, all right, good. We have a manual. We're good.
Yep.
Manual out the window.
Exactly. They're totally different. In most ways, they couldn't be any more opposite.
I'm telling you that is how it goes. I mean, I can speak for me, but yeah, my girls are as different as night and day, right? But they're still siblings and they get along and they love on each other. And I love those moments where they're loving on each other through their differences. But yeah, they are truly different children. And like we talked about on the last one, like you have to parent them differently, right? Even with consequences and things that you lay down, one thing works for the other. It really doesn't work for this one over here. you're trying to play fair, quote unquote. But I mean, what is fair when you have two different children in your household, right? It's like I I I love you both the same, but I have to love you in different ways because you both receive love in different ways, you know? So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I get what you're saying on that one.
Now, Trevor, man, how long you been married?
I've been married 9 years.
Oh boy. Yeah, you got to know that, man. That's a test question.
Yeah. Coming right
9
up here,
years. Okay.
right up here in a couple weeks.
Oh, very good. All right, cool. Well, how did you feel like your relationship changed? Uh, we'll say when your first child, when your first daughter came in, how did your relationship change with your wife? Like, how was that kind of transition, right? Because I can tell you for me, there was a transition because now, one, there's an additional body in the household.
Yeah,
And it's one that is powerless, that is fully dependent on somehow me keeping it alive. Like it changed the dynamic of my brain, I'll tell you that.
absolutely. When I've had a few times a new father asking me for advice, the thing that I tell him is, make sure to remember that you got to take care of your wife too, because that's the thing that where I slipped up is I was so, like you said, Oscar, I was so focused on, I got this little girl that I gotta keep alive. I gotta take care of her. And my wife, she's home with her all day. And so when I come home, I just want to, take her off her hands and kind of help out the most that I can. So that was where my focus was, is being as helpful as I could be, and being as much of a dad as I could be. And to look back, I wasn't being enough of a husband while I was so focused on being a dad. And that's something where I could use some improvement. And that's something I try to tell people is, it's super important to be the best dad you could be, but you got to remember that you gotta fill the
Yeah.
role as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and one that myself included. I don't think it's the malicious thing, right? Just you get so hyper focused on this, for lack of a better term, this new thing, right? Like you're like, oh, I gotta do this thing, and I'll talk to my wife. I'm like, you did a lot of work. Like, when I saw my first child be born, I instantly was like, I am so happy to be a man. Like I can never do what just happened right now. I'm telling you, it was like, man, I was just like in complete and utter awe of
That,
this woman who just not only did 9 months of just like a full and utter transformation, right? Of making a human. Now that human comes out and it's not like, no, like I'm not doing that ever. And,
my wife went through it. She went through like 48 hours of labor. It was really like a
boy.
traumatic experience for the first one. So, I mean, that's what I actually remember right after she was born. They took my wife off and they gave me the baby. And I'm just sitting there and going, your mom's so amazing. I can't believe, like,
Yeah.
so you need to
Yeah.
know this. I'm sitting here talking to the baby saying this, like, you need to know this because I was, like you said, absolutely in awe. I was like, I just can't believe, like, it was a brutal experience for me to go through. And that was just being so
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I can only imagine for her, and definitely even looking back on it now, it just puts me in awe of her strength and courage and everything she had to get through that.
100%. And then that child comes out and then they still somehow are nurturing that child. Like I would be angry. If that thing came out of me, we'd have some fighting words. You know what I mean? Like it is amazing. So,
Yeah.
but it's such a good point, right? Like you bring up such a good point that these ladies go through this amazing process that I think Blandon mentioned it before. Like the fact that we as humans are here is just this
Yeah.
grand miracle, right?
Yeah.
And
It is.
yet our wives have done that for us, right? We have these children here. And I was 100% guilty of it as well. I was just so like hyper focused over here. on this little thing that's now moving and crying and doing the thing, while my wife is still laying out, in the hospital bed, still getting treated because she just went through a traumatic event. And I don't know that at that time that went through my head, but just like you mentioned, every time we talk about it, my wife and I, or sometimes when I'll look at like my youngest, because she's kind of nuts, right? I'll be like, that came out of you. Like that was in you. Like you're crazy for doing that. So it's such an amazing thing I think it's an amazing thing when a man can really bring that down, uh, and be humbled by that experience. Like I was
Yeah.
completely and utterly humbled by that experience.
Yeah. At that point during childbirth, I tell like, so many people now think that marriage is like 50-50, and it's a complete lie. Like marriage is not 50-50. Sometimes it's like 90-10, 80-20, 100-0. And in childbirth, it's 100% her, 0% you, right?
100%.
And there's no way, there's no 50-50 in that, right? And that's my main point. Sometimes one partner in the relationship does all the heavy lifting, and you can be a support role, or you can kind of feel helpless, but that's what that is, and that's what really, like you said, humbled me in that moment to say, man, this is an amazing thing. And for my wife to have, and me to have girls that, Lord willing, one day will undergo this too, hopefully. I don't know. It's just a crazy experience. It's just a crazy thought that they'll be in that position one day too, continuing on the legacy, and man, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's crazy to think about right now.
I feel that, and I think that that's part of what, when my daughter was first born, that I was like, my wife just went through all this. Like I got to step up and do whatever I can to play my role, because just
Right.
like you said, she did all the work, And so now,
Yeah.
what can I do? I got to be useful. I got to step up and fulfill a role here and do something. So I felt
Yeah.
Yeah.
all this pressure to really really do everything I could to help out and focus on that kid. That's obviously the biggest responsibility you're ever going to have in your life. And that's
Yeah.
that's where you look at, like, where I said I slipped up, and I was so focused on the kid that I wasn't focused on my wife. They've been taking care of themselves for years, but this is a
Yeah.
baby who
Yeah.
needs everything from you, everything.
Yeah.
So that's
Right.
what the focus was.
So I'm gonna make the assumption that through that introspection that you're doing, right, that you're looking at like, oh crap, I've got to put out harder now, uh, to really catch up to the effort that my wife has put out, right? How's your relationship changed since your first one and before the second? Would you say the second one changed your relationship again, or do you feel like, obviously I have to assume the first one changed your relationship somewhat. I mean, that's
Right.
a major
Right.
life event. Um,
Right.
but how do you see that change from when you had your first daughter?
I didn't do the best with my wife there. So she let me know that, and I had to have her fill me in on that information. And I really have done everything I can to try to fix that situation and improve that and make sure that, like, that I'm focused on now there's three of them, and really trying to, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, that, that my focus is on being the best father and the best husband that I can be. And so that's really where we're at.
Yeah.
And so
So
two,
let me ask you this, Trevor. Let me, because you said that you were focused on your daughters, and which, I mean, hey, that's valid, right? I think I was as well. I know I am. But are they also daddy's girls? Are they mommy's girls? Or like, so I'll answer this. In my instance, both of my girls are daddy's girls, right? And so then it's like my wife, I could see her on the outside of this, right? Because we have this relationship over here, and they're laying in the bed with me, or we're doing this, we're eating popcorn, and then she's kind of like monitor. So then I feel like, okay, hold on. I'd have to feel like I have to include her in on this,
Yeah.
because they just naturally gravitate toward me. So How is that dynamic in your house?
I think it depends on the day. I will say I think my wife is the more fun one. I'm kind of
Okay.
more stoic and like disciplinarian sometimes. I think she's probably the more fun one, but I think it really depends on the day and the situation. I couldn't really brand either of them as a daddy's girl or mommy's girl. I think it's just different situations.
Yeah, got it.
Second
How's
one
it
comes
over there
in.
with you, Oscar? How is it with you? How's that dynamic? Are they all daddy's girls?
You know
or
how
what?
the dynamic is, man. I'm the bad guy. If the rules have to come down, they're usually because daddy put them in there. And then I give my wife a hard time because then she'll just be like, your daddy said. And I'm like, really? You can't just say like the same thing. You got to say, I said. So, sometimes we talked about this in our last episode, right? I mean, we're looking at, ways of parenting and, man, it's so funny you asked that. Trevor and I were talking before we started the podcast and, looking at like how we go about utilizing that dad capital we talked about, Blandon. So we talked about that dad capital and and how we want to, we want to have those lessons learned. We want to do these things, but we sometimes tend to, I can't remember how you said it, Trevor, but we start to over push, right? Like we over push that as the disciplinarian or as the bad guy, right? Like I said, the daddy's home now. We got to do these things because I have these expectations, and so it's kind of like that in my house. And I've tried to check myself, and I'm going to turn it back to Trevor on this because I know we already had this conversation, but I try to check myself on that because, Trevor, you mentioned that, what was it like, up to, was it 10 years old or 12 years old? You've had 75% of your interaction with your child.
Yeah. So I've seen a statistic a few times that says by the time your child is 12 years old, you've spent 75% of the time that you'll ever spend with them. And by the time they're 18 years old, you've spent 90% of the time that you're ever going to spend with them. Now, I didn't do any kind of fact checking or anything, but it sounds pretty legit, and it's definitely something that really makes me pause and kind of get in the moment and be like, I need to make the most of this time.
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah, and,
that's a
we talked
sobering
about,
statistic.
right? And we talked about that making most of that time where maybe we're not getting after as much, right? Or using, and we talked about this in our other episode too, is just using the right tone. I think I heard someone, maybe it was a pastor that I heard, but it's just like, you discipline with love in front, right? Which is hard to do. And I'm not saying that we don't love our children, but it's hard to do when you get annoyed at certain things that maybe continue to happen. Or like we talked about the lights in the room, like, damn it, can you just turn off the damn light? It shouldn't be that hard. But that tone alone can bring down that dad capital because it's simply that tone and how we come across and how we ask for things or those kinds of things. So, he dropped that statistic on me. And again, when we have studies, we put them in here, but this, I didn't do any fact checking on that either. Either way, if I really do my really horrible math, that's not that far off, right? I mean, someone said, you get 18 summers and 18 Christmases with your kids. So at 18, if I'm looking at math, it's not that far off.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm sorry, at 12, you said at 12, right? So that's nuts.
Away.
That's nuts. So, and you look at it, and I don't know about you guys, but more and more, the time seems to go faster, right? I feel like we were just in January. We're now in May. That's almost half the year that's gone. And then you start talking about your next kid's birthday, and you're like, wait a minute, they just turned, they just turned 3. Yeah, that was last year. Like, no, wait, like you gotta slow that down.
Yeah.
But sure enough, the year's moving on, and so I struggle with being the disciplinarian when need to be, but then also the struggle is, picking and choosing those battles, and not wasting the dad capital and trying to make the best of the time, as Trevor said, that we have, because I already have a 12-year-old. So you're telling me that 75% of my time is already
Right.
gone, right? That's insane to me. Like just that thought is crazy.
Yeah. Cause I'm primarily the disciplinarian in the household as well, but I think for me, I don't struggle with it because I'm also maybe the primary fun parent too. So it's like, yeah, I discipline you, but we're also going to have fun together, So it's kind of the both end. It's like I'm wearing these two hats. And so even when I get frustrated with them, I think they know that I am still gonna have fun with them after the frustration is over. So I don't know. I don't know that I had planned that out originally as I saw fatherhood. I thought I would have a standard, but I didn't know that I would still still get to be as silly with them as I can. Like I say, we watch a lot of Bluey, we watch a lot of cartoon and shows together, and we play the games that we see on there. Like one of their favorite games is like playing teddy bear in the bed, and I'm holding them or wrestling with them in the bed. But if even in that, if they get too silly, I'm still the disciplinarian. I'm like, hey, don't sister, don't do this, that, so I can bring it down. And I think that's important too. Like you're not just one way, that they don't see you as just one way as a father. So I guess that goes to my next question for you, Trevor. Like, did you have a picture of fatherhood before you had kids? And then when you got daughter, did that change? Did that picture change for you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I thought that I was going to, my kids were going to listen to me and do what I said all the time. Um, like I said, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 20 years. So, I see kids doing stuff and I'm like, no, my kid's never going to do that. Because they're their own person. And you do the best you can to instill the best values in them and everything. But,
Yeah.
it doesn't always go the way you think it's going to go. And it definitely, when you guys talked about dad guilt, I mean, losing my temper is my biggest dad guilt that I have. I feel absolutely terrible when I lose my temper with my girls. And there's being a teacher, there's a lot of advantages to it. There's some disadvantages as well. I mean, being with kids and kids my own kids' age. Actually, one of my daughters is one of my students. The other one will be next year.
Okay.
So being with
Yeah.
those kids all day long, you're using you're really using up that patience that you have in the tank, and sometimes maybe by the end of the day, it's just the fuse is much shorter, and so I think you guys mentioned something about that, how sometimes the ones that are closest to you are the ones that get the worst part of you at times, and that's something that really is one of the biggest things that I'm trying to work on and that I want to be better with.
Yeah, that's a weird
Yeah.
dynamic because you're absolutely right. And I say this a complete outsider because you for being a teacher or a saint, I'll tell you that because I was not the best student. Um, but uh, but it is so true, right? So at your job, you're like, well, I've got to have this. Not, I don't want to say a front because I don't think I'm a fake person, so I'm not putting a front, but I am putting out essentially my best at work, right? So you think, well, this is my work self. I gotta do good because I would want my kids to do good, and all these different things. But that all takes effort, and that all creates fatigue. And I'm not even talking about physical fatigue. I'm talking about just that mental decision,
Yeah.
thought process fatigue that now gets you, and particularly, I assume, Trevor, with your line of work, gets you almost like overstimulated. I mean, being around all those kids, I
Right.
can't even be around, 10 adults. I can't imagine a room full of kids, right? So going home and having that kind of like, you're kind of done with that stimulation. And then your kids, they just want to be kids at that point. They're going to play around. They're going to jump on you. They're going to yell. They're going to sometimes fight and argue. Like, and those little things right there, Trevor, man, I'm right there with you in that I now, and I think I attribute to conversations with Landon, I attribute it to, self study and self reflection. But I definitely attribute it to this podcast because I'm learning and learning to then just check myself. Because just like you mentioned, I find myself having to repair a lot more than I should. Because and it's not even like, I'm not like an angry person. It's just like that overstimulation of like, all right, I'm done. Like we're done right now. And I now have to either walk out of the room or I have to like almost physically tell myself like they're just being kids. Like they're
Yeah.
doing, like I said, I was a hard kid. So I can't imagine you know, having me
Oh, you were a
around.
hard kid. You
Bro, I
were
tell you
in
what,
Brooklyn? Come on, man.
I'm amazed. I'm
Yes.
amazed I'm in the military and not in jail. So
Woo!
so it was a I gotta say, like, I'm not saying it's refreshing to hear that, Trevor. I'm saying that it is cool to hear that process through someone else's view.
Yeah.
I mean, I constantly have to like, 5 minutes after I walk outside, I'm like, dang it, like that was not what I wanted to happen right now. And I
Yeah.
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
And you tell your kids, you say, you know better than that. And you do something like that and you say,
yeah,
you look at yourself, like, I know better than that. I know
that's
how
right.
was the way I should have handled that. And I didn't, and I feel terrible about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was reading the study about the frontal cortex, which is where all your emotional control comes from. And I could be getting that wrong, so people out there can correct me. Um, but it is a part of the brain that has emotional control. Well, it doesn't stop. It's not developed, particularly in our, in our preteen girls at 12-year-old. It's not developed there, and then younger, even more. So even the thought of like you should know better is almost like kind of nuts, right? Because you're like,
It is. It
technically
is.
they don't, and no, they can't
They
control
don't.
that like
Right.
little emotion or that little thing that like sets them off, right? And so, um, it's just not. It's crazy to see that because you're right, Trevor. Like I'll say stuff like, "What especially with a 12-year-old, like, what are you doing? You should know better." And, and normally it's not that tone. It's probably a worse tone. And then as I walk away, I'm like, oh, that was not right. Like it almost feels weird
Yeah.
as I walk away.
So what do we say instead then? How about let's think about it for a little bit, because I say it too, and I know that it's wrong and I know better. I know that, like you say, the studies show that your brain doesn't think about the consequences ahead until you're like 25. That's not even fully developed until you're 25, which is crazy. So it's like you're making decisions, not understanding the long-term, long-lasting effects until you're in your mid-20s. So, and I'm totally guilty of telling my girls that, like, you know better than this. Why are you doing? So what do we say instead? What do we challenge them with instead? Because we have to replace it with something. That's just,
Yeah.
that's just instinct, bro.
My thought, and I definitely don't know everything, but my thought is, maybe asking questions like, what was your thought process? Why did you choose to do this ever? Where I
Okay.
just asked my daughter,
Okay.
just tonight, I asked my daughter, I said, listen, I said, I feel terrible when I yell at you about something, or I hear your mom yell at you about something, and I said, how can we fix this? What can we do? How do we get past this? Because often when we do yell at her, it's after we've said something to her several times, and so
Yeah.
it's, she's got a part in it and we've got a part in it, and so I'm asking her feedback, how do we get past this? Because, sometimes kids will shock you and they will have some good insight,
Yeah.
She didn't have any tonight,
Yeah.
but she does at times.
No, that's
Yeah,
real.
that's
I
hard.
think,
I've tried
asking the question.
the question thing, and I catch myself like already irritated. So then the response to the question further irritates me,
Yeah.
right?
You gotta
Because then
watch the tone, how you're asking it too. Are you
that's
asking
right.
it
That's right.
in a sincere, I want to know, please educate me so we can figure this out together? Or are you saying it in an annoyed, kind of sarcastic kind of way? So the tone is everything.
I try not to be
When you're
sarcastic,
in that
but that's kind
situation,
of
sometimes, when you're in that situation, sometimes it's hard to have the right tone.
yeah, for sure. And I catch myself because I'm annoyed. The answer will then render the response of, "Are you serious right now?" Which doesn't make it any easier.
Right.
And
Are
again,
you serious is
and
a crazy question too. That's a wild
right,
question. Are you serious? Like with
and here,
with that tone? Because you already it's already rhetorical. So you already are just like on edge with the "Are you serious?" kind of
Yeah.
shit. Oh man,
I
I'm
know,
guilty of
sir,
that one too.
And
I know.
you say it too much when you hear one of your daughters say it to your other daughter.
Oh,
You're hearing them repeating these things that you're saying, and you're like, yeah,
Oh my gosh,
I know where that came from.
Trevor, bro, that has been. I think I mentioned it before in one of the podcasts. That has been the brightest mirror in my life. Like
yeah.
hearing my oldest say certain things to my middle child, and I'm like, I was like literally about to like respond to them, like, "Oh, that was me. Like that's 100% me." Or the wife will look at me and be like, "That's you," and it's just like, oh man, like
Okay.
that is so true, man.
Yeah, that digs deep,
It absolutely does. Yep. But it does not. That will instantly, when that happens to me, it will instantly take my irritation away from my kid. Like as soon as I realize it, it's like
Mhm.
this weird antidote where it's like, now I'm just irritated at myself. Like a kid,
Right.
like I could
Yeah.
have been irritated with my oldest, but the moment I realize, oh, that's me, now I'm no longer irritated. And now I'm just like, oh crap. Like I'm almost trying to find a hole to hide it. Cause that is like me.
Right.
I mean,
That's when you say to yourself, I got to do better because I'm setting them up. And that's how do I want them to interact with my other daughter? That's how I should be interacting with them.
I
So
guess
Trevor,
maybe the question
how
here,
do you mediate?
yeah.
Between my girls,
Yeah. Yeah.
y- you know, again, it's gonna be every situation is different. I don't know if I have the right answer. I don't know if I do. Well, I can say probably a lot of times I don't do the right thing, and that's why I'm trying to
Okay.
get better. That's why I'm trying to learn. How do you
Yeah.
do it?
Oh, now you want to flip it back on me.
Hey,
Look, I'm
that's
looking
it
for
because
I'm looking for answers for you, Dr. Trevor. You were just dropping gems here, man. I'm looking at shit.
yeah,
Um, I'm now. I'll tell you, I'm objective. I'm objective when I mediate. Like whoever is in the wrong, whoever is in the right. I'm the black and white dad on that one. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, who hit who first? Who did this? Who? I'm trying to get to the root of it, trying to figure it out. I'm asking now. I will ask questions first. I'll say, okay, so what did you do? Did you do something to goad your sister on? Did you do something to like start this? And no, daddy, I was just not, back and forth. So I'm seeing their interaction because what's crazy is, and I don't know if you guys experience this, they're sisters, but they'll tell on each other quickly. And then after they tell on each other, they go right back to playing with each other. And I'm like, that is the craziest situation. Because I might be a little salty if you run and tell on me and now you want to play with me again. I'm like, okay, I'm probably not going to play with you right now. But they go right back to it. They're like, daddy, da, 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 da. I'm like, stop doing that. And they're like, okay. And they both run back and play together again. So, but I'm completely objective when I mediate. So there is no like, oh, okay, I feel bad for you because you've had a rough day or anything. I'm like, no, you don't hit your sister or don't be unkind to your sister or as my mom would say, don't be ugly to your sister, So
I have gotten to the point, I still do that to my 3-year-old. I'm direct, don't do that kind of thing. The other two, I've gotten to where I try to, well, one thing is I now know my girls, right? So
of
like
course.
if I hear one of them like telling me something, I almost know like, yeah, that probably happened for sure. Like, or not that they're lying, but they're saying something about their sibling that's like, yep, that's accurate. Like I'm tracking that, you know? But now what I try to do is I say, okay, well, what did you do about it? Right.
Mm,
And then it's like, it
mm,
stops the game. And then I'm like, all you're doing is tattling to me. I said, first of all,
mm.
you should not be throwing your sister under the bus. Right. And I said, but secondly, what did you do about it? Well, nothing. I came to tell you. I'm like, well, go fix. Like, you guys can fix it. And then I'll sneak over there to see how they're fixing it, because my oldest can be pretty mean to my middle kid. You know what I mean? And I try to regulate that if it gets. It hasn't yet, but like if it starts getting out of control, I'm like, hey, stop.
Yeah,
And I'll
yeah,
try to stop them
yeah.
so they can re-engage. But it's something that, oh man, I cannot remember her name, and I feel really bad. Doctor, child psychologist, talked about is we especially as men, we try to just go and solve the problem,
That's right.
and
Yeah,
and and we don't allow them the opportunity to solve the problem, even if it's
yeah,
wrong. Like if we just allow them to think through solving this problem, it helps them generate those solutions for later, even if it's not that one solution. So,
yeah.
Dr. Becky something, I apologize, I cannot remember, but it was through a podcast I listened through with her and Dr. Huberman. So it was just very intriguing to realize, like, that's 100% me. I go and just like solve the problem, like you're saying, like, oh well, if you hit her, then you're in trouble. Like that's really doesn't really help. Like, why did you hit her? Why you guys think through this?
Yeah.
You're you
Uh,
can figure this out. And again, I try to stay close in case it gets overpowering. My 12-year-old can definitely overpower my, not not necessarily physically, but just emotionally, if you will, can overpower her sister. But I've been
Yeah, I mean,
trying
she's got
more and
some
more
work.
to, yeah, I've been trying more and more to ask them, like, well, what are you doing about it? Because guys, how many times you hear, or maybe it's happened to you. Hopefully, you weren't the person doing this, but you have a noisy neighbor, in a dorm room or something, and instead of going to that neighbor, you're going to the cops. You're going to,
Right.
it's like,
Right.
you don't want to just go solve the problem. Like, you don't
Exactly.
know how to
Exactly.
engage another person in a small
Right.
conflict to figure out how to solve that problem. And so, more and more,
You're
I try to just ask that question. Well, what have you done about it? How did you try to solve it? Right? It, guys, it does not always come out very pretty, but because I'm still me and the girls are still them. But I have noticed more and more. I'll hear like an argument from afar, and then that argument tends to like subside a lot faster. Um,
Yeah.
I don't always know the result of the argument, but I don't I don't see my youngest coming over crying because that happened. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming that there is some conflict resolution going on with themselves that I hope will continue. Because as you mentioned before, Blandon, um, people, taxes and death are like the only things constant in life. They're just everywhere, right? So we've got to figure out how to help them resolve that conflict.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so that's how I've tried to do it. But other than that, like in the past, I'm kind of like on Trevor's side. I just go guns hot. Like it's just like it's this has got to stop. Like this is no more. My wife will let me know that. She's told me several times, like, hey, probably not the level of interaction you needed at that moment. So that's helpful. And sometimes I'll go to her like, was that too much? And she just give me the look. I'm like, oh, okay, got it. So conflict resolution, man. Try to figure this out for sure.
Right. Yeah. No, that's
So
good,
Trev,
man.
man, we're coming to the end of our podcast. We don't want to take more of your time. I know we've been trying to get you on here for a little while. Give us some thoughts, man, on, I think I asked Brandon this before, right? Like knowing what you know now, where you're at now, what would you have changed either about yourself or your situation right before having your daughter? You know your process the last 9 years. Um, you know yourself now. What would you think would have made you better prepared for your daughter getting here, your first daughter, then your second daughter?
Um, that's the question I was hoping you weren't going to ask. That's a tough. I think uh, just this right here, having conversations with people who've been through it. I did a lot of reading up and everything, but having conversations with other men who've been through it and who've raised daughters, and that's where you're gonna get your most valuable information, and taking it, whether it's good or bad. You can take it and listen to what they have to say and say, okay, that makes sense, or I don't think you really did that the right way, so I'm going to try it another way. But definitely hearing as many different perspectives from dads that have been through it and stuff, and trying to get as much under your belt there as you can going in.
Yeah, I've come across, every so often you have friends and you'll meet their kids maybe a little bit older. I have a friend who has older daughters, and I'm like, how do I do what you did? And of course, I'm looking at a glimpse,
Right.
right? Like there's all this thing that they did, all this work, but you look at some of someone's daughters, um, and think like they seem like great girls. Like they seem like they got their
Yeah.
head together. It's like, how did you get to that, right? And so I've gotten to where I start asking that question more and more.
Yeah.
Um, because you're right. I think I wish I know we all do, right? I wish I knew I knew then what I know now, um, about all these things, and yet I feel like I don't know enough. So it's like this
Yeah.
constant search for, I don't know, for a path, if you will. But it's not a path for me. It's like I just I'm cool with like digging the path. I just got to know, how deep the path goes, how long it goes, like how wide it's supposed to be, because then I want the girls to have that path. And I bring that analogy up because this person who has these daughters has said like, let them dig the path with you. And I was like, there's an idea. Like I didn't really think of that, but that kind of hit home with me, right? Because I'm the dude that'll try to like, you know, fix the problems, but maybe I don't need to do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You saying that brings me back to something that Joey said from Fuel Hunt. And I was in that rise group, and he was mentioning having a daddy daughter date weekend with his girls, and how they planned the whole thing out together. And like you said, digging that path together, because I
Yeah.
try to do and have
That's
build as
great.
many memories with my daughters and special times with them as possible. And I'm always planning out these things and stuff. And he said that they plan out the whole weekend, and that's part of the process, and that's part of the enjoyment of it. And so, wow,
Yeah.
that's really made me rethink it. That I got a camping trip I want to plan out with my daughter. I was going to plan out for my daughter, and then I'm like, why not plan it out with her? Because that makes
Yeah.
sure I
That's
have
good.
more ownership in it. That's that much more of a memory. That's that much deeper of a connection that you get there, and that's part of the activity in itself is making that plan, and doing not just what's on your mind, but what she's really thinking about, and looking at it from
Yeah.
perspective, and you're learning more about her.
Absolutely. No, that's an excellent point to go it together, and to really like, because then that builds her as a person too, like she's seeing you, and then she's taking from that and then also adding to herself. So no, that's excellent. That's an excellent point.
That's amazing. Now I'm looking, we had the quality time episode talking about the daddy daughter stuff, and we got the planner himself here with Blandon, but you're absolutely right. Like I suck at planning these kinds of things, and we've talked about that. But yeah, allowing them to just like walk
Yeah.
through, and really, they're telling you what they want, right? So they're in that way, they're giving you a path of like, this is kind of like what I want to do,
Mhm.
and I feel like you just gave me an easy button because I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like I don't have to guess at it now, right? Which sounds funny, but it's just like I don't know about you guys. I've been married for almost 21 years, and I'm like, I'm still guessing at things. And you'd think by now I'd have a freaking plan, but it's just like I'm still trying to figure these things out. But with the daughters, I mean, it's possible that you just gave me a good easy button that really does allow them to grow, as Blandon mentioned, in their own way. Yeah. Well, hey man, listen, it has been a pleasure having you on. We have been trying to Blandon and I have been talking about, hey, when do we have our first guest? What do we do? This whole thing has been a learning process for us. But again, I've started to really enjoy it. And I say that because the first couple I didn't, and Blandon knows that, just because this is way out of my comfort zone. I'm a very enclosed person. In fact, I fought him on the whole camera thing. I was like, no. We said podcast. It's just like I have a face for radio. Let's just leave it at audio and let it go. But it's really getting perspectives from stuff that we study or literature and from people like you, Trevor. Like, this is really, really cool that you allowed us your time to get on here, that your family and your girls allowed us their time or your time to get on here. I can't thank you enough, man.
I'm so honored that you asked me to be the first guest on here. And, I'm excited to continue to be with this community and see it grow and learn everything that I can from you guys and all the future guests that you have on.
Awesome, man. Blandon, you got anything else?
No, I just want to say again, thank you, Trevor, for once again being our inspiration, being our first guest. We want to thank you for your patience through all of our learning process in this, from unstable Wi-Fi connections to hiccups, different takes, man. You've been a trooper through all of it. We really appreciate it. We hope that you'll come back on, give us some more insights, and maybe talk to us with another guest or whatever. But no, it's been great. I really appreciate your time and your effort and what you brought tonight. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both so much.
Thanks, Trevor. For everyone out there, this is the Daughter Podcast. Come have these conversations with us. Let us know what you want to talk about. Grow this community. We are going to continue to build this as much as we can because, as we mentioned, we're fathers just trying to figure it out as we go. And our best resource is each other to figure this thing out. Find us in all the social media things at Daughter Podcast. Let us know how we can be better in the podcast for fathers of daughters. So from the Daughter Podcast, I'm Oscar, Blandon on the other side, and Trevor, thank you again for being here. See you guys later.